Yeah, I welcome Mio Sop, Ron
Hello.
Eichhorn. Ron Eichhorn is abbot from Berlin, Yun Hwa Sangha, and he is a head disciple from Supreme Matriarch Kwang. Hello.
Hello. How is everybody?
Yeah, I like to know what is the online temple?
The online temple is a project that we started last year in 2024 as a kind of digital leg of our practice that we do together. So we have in our Sangha, like in every other Buddhist tradition, we have individual practice that we do at home or wherever we are. And this is also the key, actually. That's the main thing, to be honest. And then we have community practice that we do together. And this practice, normally the together practice we do in temples, either in the main temple in Hawaii, where our monastery is, or in the temples that we have in various locations over Europe. In this case, we call them Dharma, which is just a Korean word for temple. So we meet normally in these temples physically, but we created this online temple as a second layer where people can meet basically all the time, not really all the time because there are sessions, so it's not 24 hours every day, but almost every day there is a session,
Mm.
and everybody's welcome to just join in and come.
Hmm. And can you tell us what workshops are there?
At the moment, so again, we just started. We hopefully expand this all of that still, but at the moment we have 7 sessions, 6 of which are in German and one is in English. The English one happens to be the one I do. It's every Monday, 8:30 in the evening, and all of the sessions have in common that they happen every weekday or every day of the week at the same time without pretty much without exception, which means like my session is every Monday, no matter which Monday it is. It's every
Mm.
Monday from
Mm.
8:30 to 9. And so this is important because it's really reliable and has to be really reliable when these sessions are. And so people who want to join, they don't have to find out opening times or changes. They know it's this time of the day. So that session will be there. Just
Mm.
like in a regular temple. When we have
Mm.
morning practice or evening practice in the temples, then they are at a certain time, and that's when they happen. So it's the same with online temple.
Mm. And what is your vision for the online temple?
The idea is that well, basically, the idea comes from the fact that wherever we are is actually a temple. That's the correct mindset. To not distinguish between mundane places and sacred places, but to have the perception that every place and every situation you are in is kind of sacred. Or,
Mm.
yes, the dog agrees. So,
Nice.
so
Is this your guest
no,
or your own?
no, that's my own. He has to be with me, especially in practice times. She cannot be not here.
Oh, very good.
But that doesn't mean she's quiet. Mostly she's quiet. Yesterday she was quiet all the time. You never know. Sometimes in meditation she starts to move. And well, but yeah, the temple is
We
wherever you.
like to practice.
Yeah, she likes to practice. That's right, in her own way.
Mm.
So wherever you are is a temple. Muzi. Wait, I let her out. Ich lasse sie kurz raus, ja? Weil jetzt hat sie irgendwas gehört und muss jetzt.
Ja. Nice.
So, yes, wherever we are is a temple actually. And to emphasize this idea, the online temple is very good because it's actually, you don't have to travel. You can just
Mm.
open your device, your phone, your computer, whatever,
Mm.
join. And, uh, and then on the other hand, also, of course, we know practically that it's difficult for people who live far away from one of our centers or temples to physically come frequently.
Mm.
or even just once in a while. So to give people an opportunity to join into the community practice is another important aspect. And then a third aspect, which is important, is that for new people, it should be very easy for people who are interested in Buddhism, who are interested especially in social Buddhism. It should be easy to join one of our sessions because, again, you don't have to travel, you don't have to go somewhere. You can just be at home or wherever and join a session and see if that works for you. If there's
That's very good.
something you can pick up, is there something you want to learn, and then if you feel it's good and you like it and you come a few times, then maybe you want to go to one of the physical temples and take that journey too, or go to one of our retreats. Retreats is an important part of pretty much every Buddhist practice since the Buddha's time. And to join into retreats is a very important part of the practice. But of course, it's a big first step for people. If you're completely new to say, I do a retreat and I dedicate 3 days of time for that, and maybe also travel and so on, might be a bit complicated. But if you join an online session and you feel it's good, then it should be easier to make this.
Yeah, very good. And how can the people get in this online or to this online temple?
So we do it on Zoom, and that's the platform, and you get a link. And in order for you to get this link, you have to go to our homepage, and there's a section of it which is, so to say, the landing page for the online temple, and then you have to sign up, and you sign up for a newsletter, and the newsletter doesn't come very frequently, so it's not something that will spam your email. It's just updating you about the session. So if one of the sessions shifts in time, or there's maybe a new session, then that's the kind of information you get. But apart from this, it's mostly actually just a register. So we have technically and logistically, we have an overview over how many people actually join the session, and that's important for a few logistical reasons.
Yeah, very good, very good. Mio Sop, you have a winery. Would you like to tell us something about it?
Yes, I can. So I bought this winery a bit more than 5 years ago, and it was not the plan to make wine initially. It was just a plan to have a very nice place, which is still in the city of Vienna, where I live mostly. And you can go there with public transport, but it's a complete nature refuge in a sense, because it's a protected area. So we have deer and rabbits and all kinds of nice vegetation, and it's not allowed to build anything there. So it's really a very nice piece of nature. And this was the original plan to have this land. And then, but there was also a vineyard with it. Then I started to work with the vineyard, and I found it a very good, inspiring work, because it's meditative in a way, because you deal with plants a lot. And even though they look very similar, they're actually very individual. That's an interesting thing about vines. Each one of them is different. Although if you look at the whole row, they look pretty much the same. But when you look closer, you see they're all their individual traits.
Okay.
And so to care about the plants is a meditative thing. It's a very good balance between the other things I do, to be in nature and to be connected to vegetation. And then finally, to make wine, I found it interesting for a few reasons. First of all, I like to drink wine, so it's not something that is very far away from me. It's something that I like. But apart from this, I find it important for myself to always learn new things, not to stick with always the same things that I already know, not to be in the same kind of rhythm, but always to expand, always to dive into new areas and learn things that I haven't known before. That's true for Buddhism. I like to do the same with Buddhism, and to have, like it's emphasized many times by the Pope and the Buddha and other and masters generally, to have the mind of a beginner is a very important mindset for a Buddhist practitioner, but it's, I think, in life too. I think you get old if you stick to your concepts and if you don't expand, if you stop expanding, if you stop learning, and you keep being young if you feel like you're always a student.
Mm. Yes, it's very good, very good. And you have many people who help you to
It's mostly me and my wife. We have a few people that help us once in a while because sometimes the vegetation of the wines is so fast that you have to contain it more or less quickly, otherwise it will just outgrow you. There's normally June, July are these months when it's just growing very, very fast, and then you need helpers to cut them a little bit back or put them back into the wires. That's mostly the type of work we have help with, and also the harvest, because the harvest needs to be done fairly quickly. Even if it's a big amount, you have to do it early in the morning, not too long, not after midday, because then it gets too warm, and that's not good for the grapes and fermentation.
Mhm.
So this is always a big event. We have a lot of friends helping, and we make a fiesta. So we start early, and then we have a big lunch with music and stuff,
Mm.
and that's always very nice. So that's where we have help, but most of the time we do the things on ourselves. Nowadays, the past week and the next week, I have to do the pruning. That means cut back all the wines in the
Mhm.
winter. There's a specific method. It's quite demanding work. I have a lot of blisters. I don't know if you see it here.
Oh, yeah.
Here
Oh,
and
oh, oh.
here. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
my hand,
Oh, oh.
yeah, my
Oh.
hands are, and I still have to. I only have 30% now, so still two-thirds have to go. So that's very demanding for the body, but it's also good. I like it. I'm very tired when I come back in the evening. I normally
Mm,
think, oh, I want to do some other work on the computer, but I can't. I meditate and I fall asleep.
mm,
That's it. So that's this time of the year. Yeah. But
mm,
yeah, it's very nice. I like it, and it's. I think it's very much in tune with my values and with my also with my Buddhist
mm,
practice.
mm. But you are also the abbot from Berlin.
I'm
Berlin, Yun
also
Hwa
the
Sangha.
Berlin abbot. Yeah, historically, I used to have a company in Berlin, and so I was there a lot. I'm the abbot for 25 years, I think already. So it's a long time. And yeah, in the late 90s and then the first maybe 10 years of this century, I used to be a lot in Berlin, and I was there pretty much all the time.
Mm,
And that changed because I sold the company, and now I only go to Berlin for the temple
mm,
and for specific times. So I cannot live there because I really don't have any work there. So I cannot live
mm.
there the whole year. But I go there every regularly to do the moon ceremonies
Oh,
and
every
sessions with
every 2 weeks.
students. No, not every 2 weeks. We share it with others. No, okay,
Oh, okay.
I used to be easier to travel actually because the flights were a lot cheaper, and now since the pandemic, there's only one airline flying, and
Mm,
we ask for very high prices.
mm,
And so it doesn't make sense to fly, really.
mm, mm,
That used to be different before. So now I go with a car, and if I go with a car, it's a day of driving one
mm,
direction.
mm,
And so I stay a week in Berlin or 10 days, and that's every 2 months, more or less.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And in the meantime, meanwhile, no,
Yeah, in the
meantime,
meantime, also, yeah.
it is Philip or
Yeah, Philip also, but we're well, few of the old practitioners who are there
yeah,
to do the practice in the
yeah,
movements.
okay. You were president of the EBU for 6 years. What did you learn from that time?
It was an interesting experience. The Pope appointed me to be the delegate of our Sangha to the European Buddhist Union. And that time we were not members, so I was part of the process Then we became member of the European Buddhist Union as our Sangha, and then I became, because the Popsam suggested that, part of the board of the EBU. And in the early times of that, from my perspective, so in these first years, I thought it's a not very useful thing, actually. I didn't have a lot of inspiring experiences in the first year. But then when I became part of the board and involved more, I thought is that there's a big potential for it, as a platform to unite Buddhists, serious Buddhist practitioners from different traditions, and um, also create an organization that is talking to the European institutions on a level which is meaningful. So we achieved, I think, both. During my presidency, we now, since then, we have regular meetings with the Commission, the European Commission, and the Parliament, and also the Council of Europe in Strasbourg.
Mm-hmm.
And there also, well, we started a newsletter when I became president, and it was like 40 people. In the beginning, and now it's 2,000 or so. So we expanded a lot our community and the people we reach and talk to, and the people who are curious and interested. And also there's a donation opportunity for people to support EBU projects, and a lot of people do this. So it became really a big community. And personally, I found one of the things I found very inspiring is that I learned, even though there's quite a lot of different Buddhist traditions, when you look outwardly very different, and you think like these people, they do something completely different from us. When you go a little deeper and you get to know them, of course, they all do the same thing finally, because it all comes from the Buddha, so they're all Buddhists. And mostly it's different, a little bit different approaches and different ways to explain things. And because of this, I understood some of the stuff that we learned in our tradition. I actually understood it because I heard it from other people in their traditions, just a little bit different. And it is like I felt it's like, if you put, for example, if you have an object and lights, and you put one light from one side, it's kind of one-dimensional. But if you put more lights, it becomes three-dimensional. So it becomes like more dimensional and easier to grasp in a sense. And this is what happened to me quite a lot. That I understood certain things that I didn't understand before in our tradition, because of the way other people explained it in their way. And the other way around, the same, actually. So this also happened to them when I explained something. So it's a mutual thing. And I found that very beneficial. But apart from this, there's the story from the Buddha's time, when Ananda, who was the secretary of the Buddha, Ananda said to the Buddha, I think spiritual friendship is like half the way. And the Buddha said, no, Ananda, spiritual friendship is all the way, is the whole way. And that's very true, I think. That's why Sangha is an important thing also. Versus to say everybody does this on their own, meditating under a tree or in your room and on your cushion. To do this in community is very helpful and beneficial for the practice, not just because you learn how to act correctly and speak correctly, but also because you get feedback and you get a like mirror effect of reflecting your own self in others. And in this way also to explain the Dharma to yourself and to others, and they do the same with you. This is just very helpful. And that's why the Buddha, who was in his own practice in solitude, as we know. So the Buddha wasn't in community. He had his spiritual friends, but at some point they departed. So he was getting enlightened by himself under a tree. But that was not his teaching after that. He didn't say everybody should sit under a tree like I did. He said, let's get together. We have to build a group. And we have to become a model society. That was one aspect of the early Sangha, to show people how society actually should operate, but also because it's helpful. It's much easier. So I found it the same. I had the same experience with the EVU, and there's also a word for it in Sanskrit. There is Sangha and there is Mahasangha. So the Mahasangha is the great Sangha, and this includes the traditions which are not yours. And so the EBU for me is a Mahasangha, and it has a very good effect. I found it very inspiring. Of course, I dedicated a lot of energy and time and resources into this 6-year project when I was president. It was really a priority. So everything else in my life had a second level, more or less, except the retreats in Hawaii. And of course, my personal practice, but all other things, my job, my social connections, everything was had to go a step back because I really put a lot of time and effort into you, and I thought it's worth it. I think it's also important because I feel that Buddhism or the teaching of the Buddha and the Buddha Dharma will only arrive in Europe, really arrive, and not be a very small phenomenon that comes and goes. It will only really arrive if we find a way to translate it to today's people here. And I think we haven't, to be honest. I think a lot of the teachings naturally are based on Asian thought and Asian culture and Asian way of dealing with things, Asian philosophy, all of it. And that's natural that it is like this, but it is not the actual thing. So we cannot confuse this with the real Buddha Dharma. The real Buddha Dharma is beyond words, and the Buddha was always emphasizing it. He always said, don't stick to the words, understand the meaning.
Yeah.
So we have to understand the meaning, and then in our European context or Western context, we have to find new words for it, I'm sure. Otherwise, it will not arrive. The same thing happened if you look at China. I'm familiar, I think, with the process how Buddhism became mainstream spiritual philosophy and religion in China 1500 years ago. And the same thing happened there. Everything was translated. They didn't use any Sanskrit word, for example, not even Buddha. Buddha in Chinese is four. So they took not just the words, everything was put into a Chinese philosophical context, which was including Taoism and Confucianism, which is why East Asian Buddhism has these two aspects in it, whereas Indian Buddhism doesn't have it. So there are some differences, but Buddhism only arrives in a country historically if it merges with the thought and the way of perception that people have in this country. And we haven't done this here yet. It's Buddhism isn't here so long. So I think the Americans in America, they are a little further already because Buddhism came to the United States a few decades before it came to Europe. And so they have this time advantage. So some of the American older Western Buddhists, they already are a little further than us here. But generally, I think, I'm very convinced this has to happen.
And do you have an idea how this works? How we can do it, that the people the people can understand it, what this means?
I cannot say that it's completely clear, but yeah, I think so, yes. Also because we are not really pioneers. If you look at, for example, Greek philosophy, a lot of the core Buddhist principles are there. It's not something that is completely new. There is, for example, a Greek philosopher called Heraclit. He was, I think, a contemporary of the Buddha in time in terms of time. So he lived about at the same time. And one of his sayings was, "You can never step into the same river twice."
Mm-hmm.
I remember I learned this in school because I was in a humanistic gymnasium, and I thought, that's ridiculous. Of course, I can step into the same river twice. One, two, that's it, no? And it took me, of course, that was like 15 or so. It took me a long time to realize what that actually means. And that, of course, you cannot step into the same river twice. And not only that, nothing is ever the same twice
Yes.
because everything is constantly changing. This is one of the core principles of the Buddhist teachings, really one of the fundamentals: impermanence, constant change. What is the self if it's not graspable because it's always moving? So we have and he said, Heracliti had a few other things that he said very similar to what the Buddha expressed. So we have to find ways like this. We don't necessarily have to cite Greek philosophers, I think, but we have to anchor the translation of the Buddhist thought in the way our reasoning works and our cultural, historical background works, I think. And then it will be easier for people to connect. Because, for example, India texts, as an example, texts from India, I find, are like Indian culture is still today. If you look at the Bollywood movie, it's just rich, 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 colors, colors, singing, dancing, stuff, flowers, and water, and then also tragedy, and everything, everything at once. It's a very, very full. It's always very full. It's not very. It's the opposite of Zen in a way, no? And Zen, it's the opposite. It's super reduced. So you have these worlds. You have the Indian philosophy, which is very full, and then you have Zen, which is reduced to the minimum of things. And both of these things are kind of attractive, but that's not us. So, but in Buddhist philosophy, you have these worlds. You have the Indian texts, which are talking about the flowers and the sky and these beings and these beings and the colors and the garlands and and it goes on and on and on. It doesn't stop. That's very Indian. And the Zen is 2 sentences or maybe 1 or 3 words and finito. That's it. And so there's these opposite poles in a sense, no? And they're both good. So they're both valid, but they're both not what we are. So we have to find our approach to it, or our translation, because I think the way Europeans work is should be clear to us because we live here, we are born here. So we just have to find a way to translate it and not just copy it, because that's what's not working, really.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable to say, take this piece of Indian literature and memorize it and understand it. This is not working. It did not work in any place, if you look at it. It did not work in any place where Buddhism became prominent. Didn't work. It always was the case that it had to be translated into that language. Same as Korean. In Korean Buddhism, which we are familiar with, because the Popsanim is from Korea. So we have Korean expressions and Korean words. There's none of it is in Sanskrit. And it's very much in line. It's not just the language. It's very much in line how Korean thought is, which is, by the way, very different from European thought. It's more like Japanese thought. It's also actually different from Chinese thinking. But anyway, so it reflects the way how Koreans understand it. And that's also how it should be. But how can we expect that people in Europe understand this? And the fact is they don't. So unless there is
because they have no emotion. with this. I think it's important that people have an emotion for something to do it. So otherwise it goes here in and out. So
Yeah, you just can't connect. That's it.
yeah.
It is like a foreign object. And this reminds me that in the beginning, so Buddhism was in China present already for a few hundred years before it became actually like a state kind of religion, before it became actually really had a lot of followers. It was there for hundreds of years already, but people always thought it's foreign. They would always say it's the foreign stuff, what the Buddhists do. And it became not foreign anymore when they translated it and when they adapted it to the way Chinese think or were thinking at that time. So then they could connect and they could understand it. And then also people became enlightened, by the way. They had original enlightened Buddhist masters from China and not imported from India, which was the way it was before. When they managed to translate the teachings properly into not just the language again, but the way of thinking, the cultural, historical background they have. And every group of people has it, and we have it too. So this has to happen. And since we started to talk about this because of the EBU, I think the EBU has a better chance to make this happen, really, than any individual Sangha. Why? Because any individual Sangha, just like ours, is in their own thing. And that's their thing. That's what we know. That's how we do it. That's how we call it. These are the texts we use. And it's the same for everybody else. So unless you have unless you step out of this context and say, oh, these people do it like this and these do it like this, and where are the similarities, or what's the general background of it? Why do they do this? Why do you do prostrations? Why do you use beer for ancestors? Why do you use incense? Then you can understand it, and then you can also explain it to people well if they want to understand it. For example, emptiness, another thing. Emptiness is not a Chinese word, because the explanation of emptiness is from the Indian Buddhists. But emptiness in China has a different meaning, as far as I understand it, than we have of it. Automatically, more or less, or at least there's a word for this which relates much more to what the Buddhist term emptiness wants to say than what we understand when you say emptiness or Leere. Because for us, that just means there's nothing, like a vacuum kind of thing, or like, there's just nothing there. That means it's emptiness, no? But as far as I understood the Chinese word of it, that doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean there's an absence of things in the word of emptiness. It just means that there's no real substance, and then it's empty. And which refers to actually what the Buddhist words wants to say. So that's why you have to think about translation. But if you do this, of course, you have to understand what it really means. If you don't, going back to what the Buddha said, you have to understand the meaning, not the words. So if you understand the meaning, then you can say, okay, this mantra, for example, we now say it in English or in German and not in Korean. Because the Buddha didn't speak Korean, obviously, but our mantra is in Korean. So at some point, it was translated. And that's the same with almost all mantras, unless they're in Sanskrit. But even if they're in Sanskrit, they probably were translated, because the early Buddhists were prohibited to speak Sanskrit, so they spoke other languages. So translation is something natural in Buddhism, even for the most core, let's say, holy, spiritual or precious spiritual texts and formulas, and still also they were translated. So it shows you it's possible. And I assume that this is necessary, this step is necessary in order for the actual Buddhism to arrive in a place.
Ja.
Yeah, and this, okay, I conclude.
It's a
And
way.
this is why I think the
It's
EBU
a long way.
is the best, how to say, Hebamme, the best nurse,
Yeah.
wet nurse for this, maybe the best.
Yeah.
That's why I thought, okay, it helps maybe if I involve it.
Yeah. hmm Okay, I like to read a daily reminder from Supreme Matriarch,
Mhm.
Kwang the Popsanim. Daily fragrance of the lotus flower by Kwang the Popsanim. 11,905, January 12, 2025, Lotus Buddhist Monastery. It is said in the Diamond Sutra that the great Bodhisattva never has the image of I or the image of a human being, the image of a sentient being, or the image of living a long time. This Bodhisattva does not even have the image of the Dharma, nor the image which is not the Dharma. On the other hand, by contrast, sentient beings will always discriminate and distinguish in whatever they undertake. Therein, they get attached to like and dislike, and so their minds are difficult to empty out. Such a dense and heavily laden mindfulness blocks wisdom. Hence, the minds of sentient beings can easily harbor impurities. Consequently, they cannot see, hear, speak, and act correctly, or, for that matter, even think correctly. For this reason, their self-nature is blocked. Just like a dark cloud obscuring the sunlight, everything seen as dark, and therein ignorance appears. This is why they engage in ignorant speech, thinking, and actions. Hence, they guide themselves onto the wrong path. Human beings, especially those who are wise, can go on the correct path. However, they cannot even do their work correctly because ignorance appears, and so they make themselves suffer. Therefore, the world-honored one, Sukamuni Buddha, tells us not to get attached to name and form. By always keeping the precepts and doing our own work sincerely, all the results come to us, benefiting us and others. Through this, we can see and realize our self-nature. Our self-nature does not have a name or form. Just like when Sukamuni Buddha became enlightened, the seed in the empty place, which was grass, changed into a lotus flower diamond seed. But it cannot be seen with the human eye. When we realize and attain the clear mind, the lotus flower diamond seed can be seen. That is why we call it the Diamond Sutra. Thank you very much, Kwang the Popsalim.
No, well, again, this is a very rich daily reminder with many different things in it. Of course, one of the things it does, it is quotes the Diamond Sutra. And in this text, the Buddha says that the Bodhisattva should not have an image of an I or a self or a person and so on. And that's very important because that's what we constantly do. We create images of something or concepts, not just about the self. We create this about other people and their self, or we create, so to say, other persons, and we separate and discriminate all the time. That's what our mind does. It fragments things and it doesn't see the whole. It doesn't see the wholeness and the unity, and it also doesn't see the things as they really are. It sticks with the images of things. And then as long as we are in this place where we judge and we stick with the images and concepts, we live, as the Pope says in this and in other texts, in darkness, because then we actually don't see the things as they are. We don't see reality as it is. We create our own reality. And if we create our own reality, we create our own suffering. And the Buddha started, actually, the starting point of the Buddha was, as we know, the suffering. He said, where does the suffering come from and how can it end? And to put it simple, it comes from our ignorance, which is exactly this, our creating of concepts and images, and our attaching to these concepts and images. And that's not any of this is actually real. This is where our suffering comes from, and the suffering will end if we see reality as it is. And then that's all where all the suffering ends. So in order to see reality as it really is, we have to stop creating images, not just, again, about ourselves, but also about everything else. And then very naturally from there, we will be able to joyfully support and benefit other people, which is the function that we have as human beings.
And how do we know if we see the reality like it is?
Once you see it, there's no question, I'm sure. So once you see reality as it is, that's it. You see it. One of the basic teachings of the Buddha is that we are already enlightened, that we are already Buddha, that you're not separated from this, that actually everything that exists is this. This is why when you see it, it's very obvious what it is. I think there's no question about it. But of course, normally there are steps towards enlightenment or towards seeing reality as it is. And then along these steps, you go, step by step. So you will see a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then maybe at some point everything. I think it's a bit rare, at least, to say you come from complete ignorance to complete enlightenment in one instant. I think you will have to have steps before that. Because it's a purification process also. Enlightenment is not something random that just happens to you. It happens because you put emphasis on it, because you strive. This winter retreat, the Pope said at one moment that you can cure maybe not every sickness, but a lot of sicknesses you can cure because you strive, because you put an effort into it. And in my online temple session, we are talking about the 6 paramitas at the moment, and effort is one of them. And so we were talking about this, that effort is necessary to achieve anything. Without effort, without putting effort into anything, you will not be able to do it well. But on the other hand, if you put effort into something and train, you will always manage to do it well. Maybe not super well, but well. And it's the same with whatever you do, any kind of job, any kind of skill, pottery, playing the piano, being a hairdresser, anything. If you put an effort and you train, you will do it well, finally. And it's the same with the practice. But if you don't do it, you would have to be a super exceptional natural talent. And according to the scripture, these people exist like once in a million. So maybe 1 in a million is so talented that doesn't have to practice, just comes automatically.
Because in other lives they had practice very well.
But even if you have this, normally you still have to polish and practice. So you don't just appear and everything is perfect. You have to work on it. That's part of the process. And I think it also has a great value. Uh, some of the some of the Buddhist masters who became enlightened late in their lives, for example, they were very exceptionally good and skillful because they had so many experiences uh, before that. So they had a lot of experience in how to deal with people because it happened late in their life. So it's if you have this path and this process of working on yourself, it is also a value. It's not just labor. It also has a value.
I like to read the other daily reminder. 11,000 daily fragrance of the lotus flower by Kwang 11,289, May 7, 2023, Lotus Buddhist Monastery. When Sukamuni Buddha got enlightened, the sutras say that the land changed into diamonds and was decorated with all sorts of treasure flowers. The exquisite treasure wheel came down and was also decorated with its endlessly exquisite colors. It was very huge and decorated just like a vast ocean with a treasured flag and thousands of shining banners. The exquisite fragrance from all the bouquets of flowers was surrounding it, and even the 7 colors of silk covered the whole area. Similarly, Sukamuni Buddha's birth and enlightenment have adorned this world with beauty. This is because our self-nature always shines and is beautiful, clear, and pure. Many aspects emanate from there and constitute the exquisiteness of the original place. So, on the special event of Sukamuni Buddha's birthday, we place lanterns similarly adorned with great splendor. That is why revering and thoroughly appreciating them will beautifully adorn all our minds as well. So we do not get tainted by ignorant impurities. All, especially human beings, can have beautiful minds. Negative thoughts disappear, and we come out of all our suffering, living lives of beauty and happiness. This is the truth, and for this reason, human beings already have the ability to lead such a wise life. But sometimes there are surrounding situations that make us either a genius or a dumb person. Therein lie all the education, theories, and science, which can bring out our talents. So the human mind realizes the truth that we always have beauty therein, and therefore, subsequently, human lives are also full of prosperity and wisdom. So, while we are alive, we can have the most fun with a happy way to live and enjoy. Then, when we die, we go to a comfortable place and relax there for a while. We do appreciative work, and when we come back to this world again, we benefit everyone and make them all happy. Thus, all the minds of all sentient beings can have peace. Therefore, this is the way by which we can truly accomplish world peace and for everyone to live very well. Thank you very much, Kwang.
Aus diesem Daily Reminder würde ich für mich den Satz rausgreifen, der irgendwo in der Mitte ist, dass unsere Selbstnatur, also das kann man auch sagen, was Buddha oder das, was es ist, das hat ja viele verschiedene Namen.
English?
Sorry. So I think in this daily reminder, what I would pick, because of course, like I said before, they're always very rich. I would pick out is a sentence that is somewhere in the middle of this text, which talks about the original brightness, clarity, and calmness of the self nature. And I think that's a very important sentence. This is our real self, how the Pope always explains it. This is the real, this is the reality as it really is. If you go to the deepest level and beyond form, that's what you see: light and stillness and calmness. And that's also, to me, that's also important because it's something I focus on, especially in moments that are stressy or full of things. I focus on this aspect of things. So this is a very good focus point of meditation in everyday life, I think. So it's important to, when we hear these sentences or read it, not to just let it pass and think, that sounded nice, because then it will not stay with you. It will not have any effect on you, I think. You have to try to understand what that means, and then you can work with it. Because if the real aspect of, or the fundamental aspect of reality is brightness and calmness, you can focus on this, on the calmness and the light. This is what the Pope also does with us many times, no? And this is something you can focus on. I think it's especially rewarding if you do it in moments which are not calm and peaceful and bright, to focus on that. Yeah.
For me, in this daily reminder is also the important. It is important to relax and get to the comfortable place for us, to have fun, to relax. It's important, I think, on the way that we don't lose our fun, our relaxed mind. And we have to be relaxed to get enlightened, to realize our self-nature, really. We have to relax and have fun. It's, for me, important. And what I like in this daily reminders also, that there are worlds I don't know, the very, very wonderful, nice worlds, if we are enlightened, like the Sakyamuni Buddha, that the treasure wheel came down and all sorts of flowers there, and yeah, this world must be very wonderful. And yeah.
Of course, there are different layers of reality, and we only see one.
Yes. Yeah. What do you mean? What do you mean by enlightenment? I ask you, but because nein, nicht ask you. You said it already. That was a question I have here on my paper. No. How do you think world peace is even possible?
Yeah, I think world peace is possible if we create it collectively, and it always starts with us. This is what the Pope, of course, always tells us. Also, we have to create inner peace in us, and then we can spread peace to other people. And this is in a way contagious, same as aggression and anxiety and all of this is also contagious. If a lot of people are afraid, it's easy to be also afraid. And it's the same with peace. So it has to start with us, and we have to focus in many aspects where we justify aggression or interfering with others, or we justify that with something. We have to really always go back to to the thought of how can we create harmony and how can we create peace with others. And then this will finally bring it, I'm sure. It will land where our leaders are, and then our leaders, of course, have a better chance to create peace than us. But finally, we influence our leaders and we elect them. So if we elect wise leaders, then they would change things, policies. But also, if our mindfulness is harmonious and peaceful, it will create leaders that can act upon it. And I think we're not at this point. Our collective mindfulness is not very peaceful. So we have leaders who are not peaceful either, I think. And not maybe also not wise enough. I don't know. So the basic Buddhist teaching is always you have to start with yourself. Don't think about what others should be. You have to look at your own things. You have to clean up your own space, and you have to create your own correct mindfulness and not criticize others' mindfulness. And if we do this, it will work. That's also historically, I think you can see it. The more people clean up their own space and the more people have to correct mindfulness, the more other people will also follow. And then finally, we can achieve it together.
You asked in your online temple workshop the people, what is for you the Bodhisattva path? And so what is for you the Bodhisattva path?
The Bodhisattva path is the path that we should all walk. That's our function. So we are born into this world and we have a function. We have something to do, in other words, a duty or a kind of obligation. That's why we appear. And the reason why we appear is to be on the Bodhisattva path. Of course, this path requires that we move. It's not the Bodhisattva seat or the Bodhisattva standing point. It's a path. So we have to move along. And the idea of the Bodhisattva is, to put it simple, is to just think about others, value others, be kind to others. I think kindness is very important, especially in our times. To be kind to others and to try to benefit other people and not look at your own benefit and your own comfort and your own needs all the time, but very much look towards others. And it's important on the Bodhisattva path that you do this joyfully, that you don't think it's, I have to do it, it's my duty. And then I police myself in others in the sense that you judge them and you correct them. No, of course you have to correct yourself also sometimes, but it's something that we have to develop a joyful attitude towards, that we like to do it. And if you don't like to help other people, you will not be able to do it. So we have to develop this. And of course, it's our function, because reality is one of the fundamental aspects of reality is that everything is actually one. So the thought concept that we have from when we are born, that we are individuals separated from other things, is wrong. And by being a bodhisattva, you dissolve this thought, this wrong thought. That's the bodhisattva path.
Thank you very much. So I think we come to an end. And thank you very much for your time, Mio Sop.
Yeah, thank you for
this wonderful interview. It was a great pleasure for me.
Thank you. Me too.
And I'm very thankful, that you have time.
Okay, yeah, well,
okay.
Hopefully see you soon next time in another.
Yeah.
If you like.
Think in Hawaii in
another 4 years.
May. 4 years. Yeah. perhaps in a year or in two.
We see. Yeah.
We see.
Okay. So
Okay, thank you very
all
much.
the best. Bye bye. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.